Have you ever, Ian, my first question to you, had you ever seen a Federico Fellini film before?
No, I have not, Pat.
Okay.
I have now because I watched La Dolce Vita in preparation
Yes.
for this conversation about La Dolce Vita, which translates to the sweet life.
Yes, it
And
does.
you know, it made me want to go watch all the
Yeah.
Fellini movies.
Yes. Well,
Wow.
that usually does it. Yeah. Uh, what I found interesting about this, and I hadn't seen it in over 20 years. All right. And I asked Robin, I said, I don't think I saw this film because I remember very distinctive scenes of it, the fountain scene, the Jesus flying scene, the end beach scene, but I didn't remember the guts of it. So I'm like, did I see this or did I see highlights of it? But I'm almost positive I saw it because I was on a Fellini kick in the 90s where I was seeing as many things of his as I could. But that's a long time ago, and thousands of movies later, here I am, completely forgetting it. So it was a pleasure to return to it.
Well,
If
let me ask
I indeed not returned. Okay, good.
watch it again for the first time.
Watching it again for the first time. Perfect.
What let me ask you this. Let's kick off
Yes.
by asking what was your fascination with Fellini in the 90s? Had you just
I,
heard of
I
his work and you wanted to go check it out and you were in love with
Right.
it,
I mean,
or
it was a continuing education thing. One of the things that has been interesting in my movie journey, most of it being amateur, the largest percentage of it being amateur, was that I had a willingness to keep pushing the envelope or seeing things that I hadn't seen before, just to experience, what the essence of these filmmakers were. And the reason I got on the Fellini kick is Eight and a Half, his other big film. I mean, La Dolce Vita, I think, is the number one, and Eight and a Half is the second, most
which
well known
which came
film.
first?
La Dolce Vita. I
Okay.
believe Eight and a Half was 62 or 63,
Okay.
but don't quote me on that. You'd have to look at the. Anyway, the Eight and a Half refers to his eight and a half film because his first film was a short film, so his eighth and a half film.
So it's almost doing the Tarantino thing of of numbering
Exactly,
his movies. That's great.
exactly. So anyway, he that one really hit my soul. I mean, really hit my feeling of artistry in cinema soul, and I subsequently went. I do believe I saw La Dolce Vita in the same Fellini festival that I saw Eight and a Half in, but I can't remember.
So you got to experience these on the big screen.
Correct.
Wow.
1st. Mm-hmm.
Because here's my history with La Dolce Vita. I
Mm-hmm.
bought there's a somewhat recent Blu-ray, and I
Mm-hmm.
bought it a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
fully intending to watch this on my television.
Mm-hmm.
But because of scheduling and my availability to watch movies on a TV, which once you got like two kids and everyone's got different schedules, the window narrows.
I
Unless I
see.
want to watch it 2 o'clock in the morning, which I don't.
No,
So I
no, you wouldn't have been able to get through it.
so I rented it on Amazon and I
Okay.
watched it in 3 parts,
Okay.
because it's almost a 3 hour movie. So I
Yep.
watched like 45 minutes, and
Right.
an hour and a half, like this morning, essentially at 4
All
a.m.
right.
Uh,
Very good.
and the whole time I'm
I did it in
watching it,
2 parts, so I know.
nice. The
Yeah.
whole time I'm watching it, I'm thinking, I have to see this on a big screen someday.
Yeah.
And also, I'm glad I bought the Blu-ray because sometimes when that situation about buying it and then having to rent it is not unique to me, and sometimes there's often regret, like, well, why did I drop that money? But
Right.
I'm glad I own this. I'm glad I
Oh
can
yeah.
watch it on a
Yeah.
bigger screen. But it is such a beautiful movie that I had no idea what it was about. I knew it was
Mm-hmm.
about a tabloid writer and the paparazzi gang he kind of runs around with in Rome. And
Paparazzo.
right, paparazzo. And La Dolce Vita, it's the sweet life. So I thought, oh,
Right.
it's kind of this fun swinging 60s movie. And Marcello Mastroianni, yeah, I hadn't seen the movie, but I've seen that iconic image from this and from Eight and a Half. A beautiful man, the epitome of cool. And I
Yeah.
thought it was going to be a fun romp. And wow, was it not? The other thing I thought about when I was watching this was every year just about we try and do a sort of like an Easter themed, like holiday themed
Right.
movie, right?
Right.
Now this is going up tonight, so a couple of days before,
Right.
Good Friday and all that. But as far as a metaphor for
Yeah.
the virtues of like love and godliness versus the world of flesh and desire and temptation. I mean,
Right.
we literally go on a journey into hell where there's this like impromptu rock club with like fire in the walls.
Well, also it is a redemption movie. It's about redemption. What does redemption mean to this character? Um, I I said I after I watched it, I said, "Wow, this is a perfect Easter movie." I did.
Well,
It's like,
except I don't. This guy would not have rolled back the stone. I think.
interesting.
I don't. Let's.
Uh,
Well, we'll get to that because we might. Are we coming down on different sides of whether or not Marcello? Yes, Marcello the actor played Marcello the character.
mhm.
Was he redeemed at the end of this film?
I think he had an opportunity to be redeemed, but chose to go the other direction.
Yes.
I mean, it we don't. I don't think we can discuss the ending, but it needs to be experienced, I think, rather
Yeah.
than have the spoilers given. But I
Right.
I,
We don't
I
need to
think,
talk about
yeah,
particulars. Yeah.
right, exactly. So I just, there's a mystery to it at the end. There's a certain smile that occurs that you're just like, okay, so is this the entity that smiles, is are they allowing that he's going to have to learn his own sweet life as he moves on? You know what I'm saying? I
I
hope I didn't give anything away there. I
I
just
took.
said don't give anything away, and then I just, okay.
Well, it's kind of vague, but I would say that it was more of if let's talk about this in the context loosely of a morality play.
Right.
That smile was almost turning to the camera because the person we're talking about does turn to the camera
Yeah,
and give a
turns to the
smile.
camera.
To me, it's like a meta contextual where it's like, now this is what happens when you don't do the right thing. The choice is yours. It was kind of a knowing thing, like, so what would you do in this situation?
Well, you might want to say also too that we're smiling along with it. That we're in on the gag, if you will. I don't know.
I
That's
I
it.
didn't think there was a gag though. I thought it was like a really sad, bleak as hell ending,
Yeah.
except for we in the audience who have a choice not to do what we've seen in the preceding 3 hours.
Have you done research on how the film is split up, which I hadn't realized before? I didn't do any kind of research beforehand, but of course, once
I
I'm done with the film, I want to see, what the entry is in Wikipedia and what IMDb and all that says. And
well,
I did not realize um, it was contextualized into days. There's 7 episodes, and they all represent days, and they all end in the dawn of the next day. So, in that context, and I don't, if you want to go over it, but we can. I like to. I'm fascinated with what day was your favorite. Do I need to go over them?
possibly, because as I watched this, kind of cut up into different chunks, as I
Right,
mentioned, and having not seen it before, I
right,
I too looked at the Wikipedia right before we jumped on here, and because you're
right.
you're so punctual, you jumped on a few minutes early, Pat, so I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing. Thank you. But no, I did see that thing about the seven vignettes kind of representing the 7 days, and then the epilogue,
Right.
which the talk about a gosh, okay, Bonnie and Clyde. I know this is actually going somewhere. That was 1969, right?
7.
67. Okay.
Hmm.
That has probably one of the most famous metaphorical costume reveals in history at the very end when
Right.
the chief lawman steps out.
Hmm.
In the end, when we see Marcello in that uh, epilogue, before we even know what's going to happen with his character, he shows up dressed very differently from anything else he had worn throughout the
Right.
rest of the picture. And that
Right.
just kind of epitomizes the trap that he has sort of fallen into slash made for himself. I won't go any further than that, but I thought
Right,
it was just so, like much else in this movie, it was so well thought out, so well planned, and
right,
thematically brilliant. So you don't even necessarily register it if you're just watching it as a movie,
right.
but it does hit you by the end.
And I didn't realize it until after I did the research, but that makes perfect sense, you know. Um, but just quickly, there's the prologue, which is the Flying Jesus, the episode one where Emma attempts suicide, the episode two, Anita Ekberg scene, episode three, everything having to do with Steiner, and that's split into three parts. Episode four is the sighting of the Madonna, the miracle. Then there's the intermezzo, the meeting with Paola, the waitress. And
Mm-hmm.
then episode five, Dear Old Dad. Episode six, The Castle. Episode seven, The Party. And then the epilogue, which we just talked about. So, of those episodes, did you have a favorite in the movie? I guess is what I'm asking.
You know, I'm fresh off of this thing, but it's
Okay.
well, no, it's going to sound like a cop out, but I can't think of any that I didn't like, and I
Right.
can't think of any that I loved more than any of the others because they're all very different, even though they involve
Yes.
some of the same characters and the same kind of, they're all in the same city, except for they go out to the country to see that alleged Madonna sighting. Um,
Right.
but they're
And
all,
also to the castle.
oh, to the castle. Yeah, the geography is kind of weird here because I never know exactly how far out or away from where they're supposed to be they are. But no, they all serve these great purposes, and they're all
Right.
wonderful, like mini movies with their own atmosphere. And I
Precisely.
love the trajectory of the debauchery from start to finish. Like you start
Right.
off with literally Jesus flying through the air
Right.
as a
Right.
statue being delivered,
I
and
told you
then
it was Easter.
yeah, and then the sighting of Mary and all this other stuff. But by the time we get to, I believe it was the castle with Marcello just going to a party that's being held by this, rich, completely soul dead, bored family
Yeah.
that traipses to another property that the son owns, and he's the heir, but this
Right.
property has been completely run down and neglected. And the dad is like, well, this is going to be yours someday. The kid's like, I don't really care. And they have a seance, and it's all very performative and and just debauched and kind of gross. And the next morning, everybody's kind of hung over, and they're leaving. They're going back to their home, and they encounter, I think it was the mother or the matriarch of the family, um,
Yes.
and she's in a procession with the priests. I don't know if this was like on Easter Sunday, but they're like marching to church, and they run into these drunk fools.
Well, I love how the son, who's like a prince of some sort, runs over and gets in the procession, and then his son goes right behind him. I love that. Yeah, I just bring that up because you're right. They all have the weight of their purpose. All the episodes, if you will, have the weight of their purpose. The Steiner stuff was really fascinating to me because Steiner represented, and a lot of this had to do, as I looked at the context of when the film was made, it had to do with the post-war boom in Italy. Italy had an incredible, like the United States, had an incredible boom post-war where they kind of swept the rubble away and built a new city on top of the old war-torn place, and it caused a real estate boom. And there were several scenes where we're going to the outskirts of Rome with these terrible, housing. I would call them housing projects, but basically they were this where all the middle class and the prostitutes and the ne'er do wells lived, and it was just interesting to see, Marcello and his rich friends kind of slum in these places, and so to see Steiner, who kind of represents everything that Italy had gained, he got the good house, he got the kids, he got the posh address and all that, um, and still be existentially um, downtrodden because of it, is quite extraordinary. all his conversations with Steiner were amazing. The one that they had in the church and the one that they had at the party.
Right. And at the party, Steiner's a very tall man. And at one point, I think someone makes a reference to like, you can see everything from up there or something. And he says, yes, I'm tall, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm this big. And
Right.
it comes back to, that was being recorded
Right.
by some gadfly at the party. And
Right.
then later on,
There's
and
a
that,
lot of gadflies in this movie.
swarms of them. And we'll talk about that too. We'll talk about that too. But just to get a little spoilery, because it's one of the most shocking scenes
Yeah, I
in the
think so
film
too.
is Steiner, who, and he's kind of trying to reach out, I think, to Marcello, or at least to tell him,
He
like,
is.
because Marcello, his existential dread is, I love women, I love chasing tail, like anything in a skirt is up for grabs, even though I've got this live-in girlfriend who I describe to people as my maid, the lovely Emma.
Yes.
He doesn't have it in him really to be in love or be in a committed relationship. Whereas there are people around him that definitely want to be that with him, even though that it's not necessarily the cliche of, oh, I could change him, but it feels like Emma and Maddalena and some of the other people who show up feel like they could look past some of his indiscretions because they really just want to be with him. Now, Steiner, he's looking at this freewheeling free spirit, and he's like, well, yes, I've got stability, I've got a home, and I'm very well to do, which Marcello is not really, but I'm still kind of empty. And it reminds me of this biblical passage. I don't remember where it's from, but it's like, what will it profit a man to gain the entire earth and forfeit his whole soul?
Right.
So it's like you can have everything and be, just kind of
Well,
dead inside.
also the old cliche, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it.
Right, but it's interesting because it does speak to that sort of middle class push and pull,
Right.
where you do have that sense of responsibility and you want to build up security, but then you become trapped by that security and having to maintain it.
Right.
Whereas you can't really go out and live that bohemian, crazy
Right.
swinging lifestyle anymore. You have to live vicariously through people who come to your house for parties, which I guess is an upper middle class problem, if nothing else. But no, later the scene I was talking about was when Marcello gets the phone call to go to Steiner's place, and it turns out that Steiner has shot and killed his two young kids,
Ugh,
who, when we see them introduced to the party, they're dressed all in white, the little angels,
right.
and then he shot himself in the temple. And I did not think that we were going to see those kids.
Mm,
And we don't see exactly what happened, but it's almost
right.
worse because we see like this kind of an over the shoulder, sort of an elevated
Right.
angle of a crib, and you can see a form
Right.
partially obscured in that crib. And it's like, oh my God.
Which we were introduced to earlier too, which was almost a ethereal, angelic place for these children to sleep.
Mhm.
Yeah, Steiner said a miserable life is better than an existence protected by society in which everything is organized and perfect. He longs to be detached. It's best to remain detached. And I think, no matter what kind of successes or family life or whatever some people get, this is just their nature. It's their nature to question like this, and that's why we have psychotropics, I guess.
Well, then also, and we'll talk about those gadflies, because the scene following it, you realize that Mrs. Steiner is
Yes.
coming back to town
Uh,
from a trip on a bus, and because this is 1960, there's no way that she would know of this horrible thing that happened while her children
right.
were in her husband's care. So the paparazzo, they find out where the bus is coming in, they get their cameras, and they're like all
Uh,
set up to do a photo shoot of this lady. She gets off the bus and she's walking, and they're taking pictures, and she's like, oh, what's this all about? And
am
then
I an
the chief,
actress?
right, and the chief detective and then Marcello come up to her and break the news, and it's devastating
Yeah,
because
it really is. It reminded me of the Princess Di situation in a sense.
yeah,
That these jackals were circling around her without her knowing what was to come next. Uh,
well,
it was
especially
it was
because
quite stunning.
it is, and it's
Paparazzo, by the way, was the name of a character. One of the
yes,
photographers was named Paparazzo. So that's where the term paparazzi comes from.
Is that
It's,
true?
yes, it's kind of a nonsense word. Uh, of course, Fellini said he met somebody named Paparazzo, a Greek man. So I think he just made it up. But the closest thing in Italian, I guess, means sparrow. And Fellini also said that they reminded me of sparrows as they
Just
clumped
kind of
around people.
flit about and yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's it's a movie that brought a word into our lexicon.
and unfortunately, it's a lesson that we still haven't learned 60 2 years later,
Yep.
because throughout the film it starts off kind of fun, like, oh, Marcello is a tabloid writer and he's got this kind of gang of photogs, or they're kind of always following each other to the big stories. um
And
but
he gets to fly Jesus to the Vatican,
right.
and he
um
gets to see some bikini lasses as he does it.
and so do we, some nice close-ups from the rear angle. But no, but when Marcello
Real
is faced with
bodies.
his yes, when he's faced with his own personal tragedies and mini scandals, like if Emma's freaking out or if he needs to do something discreet because one of his friends is in trouble, there's always someone around with a camera, and they don't even respect the boundaries of their partnership, friendship, whatever you want to call it. They're just there to get the picture. And you wonder if he had ever been in that situation with one of them, to like, no, I just tell me that I gotta get the story from my newspaper. Like, were they vicious to each other, or was it a one-way street?
Uh, yeah, it's an interesting question. Um, one of the things that what struck me this time. Okay, so in remembering the film, the things I remember were the flying Jesus. I remember Anita Ekberg, who can forget her, and I remember the beach scene at the end. Nothing else. Nothing else. So, so to talk about just for a second, Anita Ekberg, one of the things that really impressed me about her performance was that she totally understood the situation that the actor she was playing was in, meaning that the whole world loved her, and all she wanted to do was have adventures. She didn't care who loved her. She didn't care that Marcello had a crush on her, or her fiance, Lex Barker, who once played Tarzan, which they reference in the movie. Just this whole detachment that she has, that she wants to live her life as an adventure, not as a object of desire. But unfortunately, her, I'm the old Jessica Rabbit line. I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way. And it was, I was so impressed by the subtlety that she had with that, because she was playing those men just to have adventures, essentially. And she did. She was in the frickin' Vatican Dome and could see the whole city from the Vatican Dome. She wouldn't have gotten that if she was, just an ordinary person. So anyway, a lot of people like, oh, the fountain scene where she's, completely free and blah blah blah. There was a lot more to that. Like the cat thing was very interesting to me, because it was just like, so, I'm going to use the guy to get the milk. I got a cat now, so Marcello, go and get me some milk, and he did.
And I love that too, because at one point there's a cut and you see her walk into frame and you're like, I had to rewind this because I'm like, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. The little kitten was actually on top of her head, rolling around. But no, it's
Fantastic. That was a suggestion on set. She said, "Oh, sure, I'll do it." Yeah.
well, the Vatican thing, she goes in and she sees that people have written their names and she's like, someone get me a pencil, I want to write my name. I'm like,
Exactly.
it reminded me of that scene from like 10 years ago where Justin Bieber went to Anne Frank's house. Do you remember this?
No, I don't.
He
No.
I don't think he meant anything by it, but he said, I think if Anne Frank had been around now, she would have been a believer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that.
God.
Probably she would have.
Sure. That's
So yeah, so the Ekberg scene. How about the miracle scene, the sighting of the Madonna, the flurry of people who brought the sick to it, and then then the pouring rain on everybody. It was almost like, again, be careful what you worship, because nature will have its way as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, that scene, especially because, when it first starts to rain, they're like, shut off these lights, because they have those big
Yes.
Raiders of the Lost Ark lights
Right.
up, and like,
Right.
these things are going to short circuit in the rain. But no, it's, again, I'd have to dig deeper into this and do some more thinking on it. But your idea of washing away, I think, is apt, because what's
Yeah.
really strange about this scene is there's not a lot of, I don't remember there being a lot of context to it. Marcella just kind
No.
of shows up and we
Yeah.
figure out, oh, there's a couple of kids who've
Right.
seen the Virgin Mary. They've been whisked off, I guess, to the Vatican to be interviewed. And then
Right.
they come back. And in that time, paparazzo shown up. There's like people have crowded around from the village and I guess surrounding places. And when these kids show up, they're having to be held back by police, and there's folks screaming and yelling at them like in a positive way. And I just kept thinking, what are they yelling at and hoping to accomplish here? Are they thinking that if they touch these kids, then they're going to somehow become
Right.
holy, or
Right.
what? It seemed like that whole idea of praying in private, like you're not supposed to make a spectacle of a
Right.
miracle. And I feel like that rain that came down was, yeah, exactly, splashing water. And I'm like, you don't deserve this. Go
Right.
home.
Well, there's such a timelessness to this film, because a lot of the issues that we see, or a lot of what is being expressed through these scenes, are somewhat things that we still deal with. I mean, the whole miracle thing, and the whole, again, jackling of the press and the TV and everybody just circling this thing, like Day of the Locusts or something. It's just like, um, we're just like the flavor of the moment. We're the same way now. We concentrate on one flavor, and then when we chew that flavor out of that piece of gum, we move on to the next piece, and it obscures so much of what actually is happening beneath the surface. And I think that's one of the points that Fellini is making.
Definitely. I think, because it's this mob mentality and this sensationalism, no one really stopped to think. Like, if this had been a scene about Jesus coming back to Earth, we probably still would have seen a similar bit, except they would have been trying to get the exclusive interview with the newspaper instead of stopping to reflect, what does this mean
Hmm.
for me and for the world? Not like, can I get the 9 o'clock spot?
Well, there's a lot of old world versus new world in this. We um, we have the world of wealth and the rebuilding of Rome, and the Via Veneto area of Rome, where it's all crowded and people are in the cafes, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have, the farmer. What's that light? Oh, it's the farmer getting up. Or we have, you see in the background, a lot of people just working day to day, having no modern conveniences. So a lot of that, a lot of the Madonna sighting had to do with that old ancient Catholic thing that, my God, a miracle. We must be part of this miracle, even though the cheapening of the miracle comes from the modern world.
Yeah.
I mean, so it almost predicts what's going to happen in the 1960s, in the sense that, you know, Rome had already felt these rumblings of change. It was mostly a young person's change. And then, boom, we go into the 1960s, and that occurs everywhere. So, I mean, it's easy with hindsight, but but it is quite remarkable in that way, in that because this film was made in 1959, released in 1960. So my parents were married in 1959. To tell you how long ago that was.
Wow.
I know.
um, let's talk a bit about Emma, Yvonne Furneaux, the
Yes.
the the live-in girlfriend slash mate. Their relationship is a bit weird too, because sometimes I think they refer to her as a fiance and as a cleaning lady, but never, never like girlfriend, certainly not bride, because she wants to be, married. But
Well,
especially. Oh, go ahead.
no, I just was gonna say it was kind of convenient for him because she's willing to sleep with him. Again, outside of that very Catholic atmosphere in Rome, and because of that, it's a pretty convenient thing. He has somebody to be with while he can go off and do whatever he wants to do, and he does.
Right.
So,
And
go ahead.
she's staying with him, right? The couple of
They,
scenes where she's on the phone with him and he's off somewhere
right,
else, and she's like, come home. What struck me is we get a couple of glimpses of the place where she is, and it's like this threadbare apartment with like a mop or a paint bucket or something in the foreground and nothing else. We see that long hallway shot down to the bedroom where she's hanging up the
right,
phone. I'm like, so this really is just about him living, putting on these appearances so he can be this like jet setter wannabe as he
right,
mingles with the rich and famous,
right.
but literally he goes back home to nothing.
Well, let's talk a little about his relationship with Madalena because you brought
Okay.
that up earlier.
AKA the prostitute, AKA wait, was she the prostitute?
No, no, she's not the prostitute. They picked up a prostitute and went to her apartment. Remember, and it was in the
Yeah.
first section.
The problem, Pat, and aside from Sylvia, most of the women in this movie I had a hard time distinguishing because they all have kind of the same facial structure and pretty
Yeah,
much the same hair, and they all wear black dresses. I'm like,
it's
okay,
very
who
true.
is what?
Well, Madalena was the heiress who Marcello had sort of a fling with, but
Right.
they accidentally kind of connected more profoundly than just a fling.
And
And my
she
thing,
was one from the castle too at the end.
right, she
Yeah.
was the one that whispered to him in the echo chamber. They were separated, and she went to an echo chamber, and he could hear her but didn't know where she was, and they could talk like they were on walkie-talkies or something. And the point about Madalena is that she did love him, I think, but she also knew that he would never be loyal to her. I don't know if she was looking for loyalty primarily, but she knew she wouldn't get it from Marcello. And it was very telling when that boy came up to her in the echo chamber and they started making out. And I'm like, okay, she is searching for something specific that she's not getting from Marcello, even though she loves her. And they couldn't do it together. They couldn't be in the same room and have pronounced their love for each other or let's get married or anything like that. So
Well, it's
I,
also because, coming from that family where there aren't any, don't appear to be very many role models for what a healthy relationship looks
exactly.
like. She might have thought, yes, I'm in love with him. I want to get married. And
Right.
marriage means we don't talk much about the side tail we're getting all the time.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
interesting.
it's a tragic
I
kind of
tell.
figure, especially because Marcello doesn't know that she's making out with this random dude. All he knows is that she says, "Hey, let's get married." And
Right.
then things kind of go quiet, and then
Right.
cut to
Yeah.
everyone's leaving the castle. And he's like, "Wait, where's Madalena?"
Yeah. Right.
She disappeared.
And then hooks up with Vampira, the woman with the white streak in her hair. So,
Any port in a storm. Jeez.
um, so what did you think of the scene with the waitress? They call it the intermezzo in the movie, the middle part. That it's not really a chapter. It's just first off, it's beautifully shot. If you
Mhm.
notice, they had like almost a filter around the whole sequence, like there was a bamboo uh, canopy above this place where he was working on the typewriter. It was a cafe of some sort, and the light through it, the sunlight was diffused, so gorgeous. Even on a TV, I was like, that is just stunningly beautiful.
It, rem-
And
it reminded me a bit of that kind of buttery haze that was in Summer of 42. Um,
ah,
which, by the way, Pat, I don't know if you've ever watched my Don't Read the Comments videos. Um, there's one coming up soon. Someone took us to task for our Summer of 42
oh
episode, and it
good,
is epic.
oh my God.
Wow. So stay tuned.
Excellent, excellent. So make sure you tell me when that's up.
Well,
So
the waitress scene,
I
yes.
want to go to the waitress scene. The purity of that girl is very, very interesting to me because she what would you guess her to be? 16, 17?
That's, you know, I would assume so because she's working. I don't know what the age laws were like in Italy in 1960, but yeah, she struck me as being about that age,
Right,
but she's presented as being so innocent that she could have
right,
been like 13 and like working for her uncle or something
right,
as,
right.
cleaning up tables. I don't know.
Well, her purity was such that Fellini actually discovered her. Oh, I know I have it somewhere, but I'm not going to try to call it up. He discovered her in like some sort of school, saw her outside of
That
school and
doesn't make it
said,
any better, Pat.
"No, it doesn't. There's my Paula. That's her." I mean, that's basically it. It wasn't like anything more salacious. Who knows? I don't know. But the point is, she was so perfect. She was so in her innocence and her budding beauty, if you want to call it that. And he was the one that was, for the first time, an older gentleman was creating a situation where he was flirting with her. I have lust down, but I'll say flirting. And the effect that that has on her actually kind of does come back a bit as she reappears later in the film.
How so?
Well, I think some of her gestures in the end, where he couldn't hear her,
Hmm.
was part of a response to the incomplete conversation that they had at the cafe. Um, if you want to believe that she actually exists. If we start talking about the metaphorical aspects of this film, perhaps the intermezzo was something that was on another plane of reality for him. Who knows?
Well, I've got one for you, Pat. I don't know
All
if you
right.
picked up on who was playing on the beach behind her in that
Mm-hmm.
last scene.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice?
You'd have to remind me.
Two children dressed all in white.
Ah, well, I
Could
mean,
have been a complete coincidence, but I was thinking
no,
if we're talking about that choice between heaven and hell, I mean, I know
right,
that the waitress, if we are,
right,
because you bring up an interesting idea, did he imagine this this,
right.
this girl? Because he didn't try and sleep with her, really. I mean, that's the
Well, I
one.
mean, it was a conversation with himself, perhaps.
Right, and but I think that might lend some credence to this idea that she might have been a figment because every other woman in this movie, he's not only putting the moves on, but he's taking the bed in some fashion.
Well, she was a child. I even
Those wacky
even
Italians. No,
Fellini would not go that far.
maybe Federico
So
Fellini instead.
that's good. How about Dear Old Dad, episode 5?
Fascinating stuff, and
Amazing,
didn't go where
amazing
I thought it was going to
short
go
film.
either.
No, 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 no. My feeling was he couldn't perform. He wasn't. It wasn't that he had some sort of attack. It was like he could not perform.
I
He had
didn't even
come to
think
the end
about
of the
that.
road.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was his ennui. The way that he it was a couch of some sort, obviously, and he was kind of making the bed. You know, he was kind of brushing it out, trying to brush away the fact that he could not perform with Fanny. I love Fanny. Her character was amazing.
I
I
love
mean,
Fanny too, and the character was great as well.
first she was a performer, then she came to the table, and then completely insulting Marcello, completely just like obliterating him. And then his father picks him up, and she goes with him just to get back at Marcello. Beautiful.
Now, and the other thing is, that next morning he's like, oh, it's 4 o'clock, there's a 5:30 train I can catch, and Marcelo's
Mhm,
like, no, please stay, because
mhm.
during this whole night he's realizing that he never really got to know his dad, because when he was younger his father was like always away on trips and things and was kind of emotionally
Right.
unavailable. But now they're reconnecting when they're older and he doesn't want him to go, I think, and that speaks to some of the lack of love that's in Marcelo's life. not necessarily just romantic love, but just love, period. So when, but the thing about the father is Marcello's mom is still very much alive, and I think they're still married. He's going
Okay,
home.
yeah, right, because he mentions that.
Right. So it's kind of dear old dad, the dear old cad, but it's also,
Dear
he's
old
also
dad.
kind of a cheating, he not, I don't know if this is his kind of first foray into this and it didn't work out, or if this is
No,
something he does all the time.
I mean, as the tree bends, so grows the twig. That the Marcello was exactly like his father, because that's the example that was held up to him. Although now he feels like he needs to get in touch with him again, and the man, the old man doesn't give a damn that he has a son. He probably doesn't give a damn that he has a marriage. He just is in his old age, and he's just riding it out.
Well, I wouldn't put him as cold as that necessarily, because it did seem, up until that next morning, it did seem like he wanted to go out and, spend time with his kid. Now, his son does have this, swinging lifestyle that affords him the chance to get into clubs and dance with beautiful
Right.
ladies, but they did seem to be connecting on some level. Now,
Mm,
if you
I
want to,
don't know. I just felt like he was a restless spirit that
yeah,
that you know take me somewhere. Where do you go? Oh, I know this club, blah blah blah. And they went to this. And how about the acts at the club? The trumpeter act. I love the trumpet act. And she goes, "It always makes me cry." And I was like, "Yes, it is. It is. It
this
is
was this was like
poignant."
this whole movie is like, there's elements of the Warhol, factory all over this place with the bizarre
Speaking, I
performance
got
art.
I got a great fact about that. Speaking of which,
Yeah, share it.
but well, when we get to the section, because I'm going
Oh, okay.
section by section.
Well,
We kind of talked about the castle, but because of the end of the castle, this is episode 6. But we kind of went over that stuff. I don't mean to be steering it in the right direction.
no.
I just like hearing step by step what you were feeling about it. And, but the castle was fascinating to me because of, like you said, the boredom. They were completely. It was like, what happens when all this life becomes too excessive? You know, the only one guiding anybody was the youngest son. He was the only one still fascinated with it because it was new to him.
Hmm.
Everybody else was a jaded piece of furniture, essentially.
Literally,
Even the servants.
there was this one, I don't know who it was in this whole mix, but there's definitely a shot where you see this one guy. He's so far sunken into slash draped over the couch with that 1,000-yard stare. You don't get the feeling that he's drunk. You just get the feeling that none of this means anything to him anymore. He's seen it all. He's done it all with everybody in every which
Right?
way.
And well, how about the grandmother? She was completely asleep. And then he insisted on waking her up to introduce her to Marcello, and she's just like going through the motions. It was extraordinary. There was some other. Well, Vampira was in that scene too. The woman with the white hair in her that she actually hooks up with Marcello later. Um, but the whole journey through that castle, where they went to the old part of the estate, been around since the 1500s, and they're having that strange seance where the woman goes into almost speaking in tongues. I mean,
Right.
I was like,
I think someone else was like, you did the same thing last time.
true. But I mean, there were so many extraordinary things happening in the castle sequence. Um, I mean, one of the notes I made, it's one of the most unsafe car movies ever made. I mean, the fact that nobody gets into an act, they all drive drunk. There's not a seatbelt to be seen, and they all drive cars that look like if you flicked it too hard, they would fall apart. So,
Right. And there's a lot of people, especially with paparazzo, when he hops in the car, like get in the back, he's like riding on top of the back seat.
with one stomp of the brake, and paparazzo is roadkill.
Yes.
Paparazzo. I
Uh,
like Paparazzo too. You know, he makes his confession to Paparazzo about his father. Remember, there's that small scene in chapter 5 where they where he tells of his father's background and how disconnected he was from him.
yeah.
Paparazzo was almost his confessor.
Well, it's true, and that's why, when we're talking about the relationship between Marcello and his dad. um I feel like the whole, like, let's go to the club and everything was more, I get the feeling they hadn't seen each other in a while, and he's like, I've never gotten to, see my son at work, to see what he does. I'm interested in, what your life's about, so I just want to go. I feel like if he had worked at the post office, his dad would have been like, can I see the letter sorter machine?
Okay.
you know
But I was thinking about this the other day, and since we're talking about dads, what would be the best thing you could say about your late father?
He loved me in the best way that he knew how.
Said in the form of a question? I
It's
can't answer that.
Well, that's one of those big profound questions that you don't drop on someone in the middle of the afternoon during
Well,
a
I mean,
during
we
a
were
Zoom
talking
call.
about dear old dad.
Yeah, I know. No, it's, I definitely inherited my sense of humor from him.
Uh-huh.
And the older I get, the more I understand him, and I
Yeah,
understood why we didn't get along.
interesting.
But I also understand some of his disappointments, which have sort of become some of my
Right.
own. So I'm a bit more charitable in his memory than I was in his life.
Interesting. See, the other day, and I was talking to my mother about this, one of the things that was extraordinary about my dad is that he was kind. He was a kind individual. He never, ever stopped being kind, despite what life gave him or, how he approached it. I mean, that doesn't mean he wasn't angry or depressed sometimes, but he still conducted himself with kindness. And I think that was a good example. And, I'm trying, in my memory, to dismiss anything that was negative about our relationship because in the end, it doesn't matter, you know. So,
Well, no,
everybody, you got the confessions of the dads.
well,
Next
that's
next month, we'll talk about our mothers.
don't you go
That will
talk
be
about
an
my mother.
entire
No.
episode.
Yes. We're going to talk about Albert Brooks's mother. No. Um, which I've
Oh
never
my!
seen.
Oh my!
But there's very good George Decay there, by the way.
Yeah. Oh my!
No,
We're gonna do full decay.
so what, I mean,
So
where are we at here?
I'll transition to the party, the final orgy party, and that's where the Warhol connection is most distinct. There's a character named Nicolina, and I said I recognize that character, and it turns out she's Nico. She was in the Warhol factory. She
Really?
sang for the Velvet Underground. Very distinct look, and there she is in frickin' La Dolce Vita. I mean, you
Now,
can't
which
get a better connection of the 60s between La Dolce and the Warhol factory. And I was thinking to myself, what a decade that woman had. She was in a Fellini movie, and then she hooked up with Warhol, and then she sang with the Velvet Underground. Not bad for 10 years.
was there? I want to say there was a documentary, or maybe it was a drama about Nico that I didn't get to see.
I
I assume
think
it
I
came
think
out.
there is a one. I don't want to mix her up with shoot. It was a woman who she can't be the same person. Okay, I'm not. I'll reference it later. I'm not going to sit here and show my senility to everybody. Um, is that party the end of the world or the beginning of a new one? That's a question I ask.
It's the end of his, um,
Ah,
because it's, well, we mentioned the outfit. Like throughout the entire film up to this
right.
point, he's dressed in the cool, black suit with the shades and, the awesome hair. When we
He does
see
have good
him,
hair.
yeah, but when we see him in this scene, some time has passed between the previous vignette and
Right,
where we're at now,
right,
because he says he's left the world of, tabloid writing and
right.
become a publicist essentially. And I guess,
Interesting. In my translation, it was advertising, and then I did some research afterward, and they said publicist. I'm like, why did they say publicist in my translation? That was
in
weird.
what I was watching on Amazon, it said, he didn't say publicist, he said, I'm in publicity now, which I just assumed meant he'd become a publicist, but
He goes, I'm in advertising now. That's what he said
oh,
in my translation, which I thought was interesting.
now I got to go see if the Blu-ray is different from Amazon. What are they trying
And
to
the
pull?
Blu-ray translation is different. In fact,
Wow.
they used the term cougar in the Blu-ray to refer to somebody at the party. And I looked it up. Cougar was not in use until 2001. So obviously, when they were doing a fresh look at the translation when they were in the subtitles.
Cougar was also in the Amazon version. So
okay,
how about this? Maybe Fellini introduced this term in 1960, and then 40 years later, someone was like, "Hey, that's kind of cool. Let's let's introduce this into the popular lexicon."
And again, I don't get when they put translations down, because again, it was in white type with the black border. So but when there's so much white in this movie that whenever it was up against it, I had trouble reading it. See, and I'm like, why didn't they put it in yellow? Who cares? You're going to read the subtitles anyway.
Well, the Amazon translation, the Amazon actually put it below in the black, in the letterboxing, which was nice.
But it was a full screen version. I didn't have the letterbox. And also there was the option where you could watch it with the dub. Because back in the day, they always, if a foreign film was popular, they did an English dub on it.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that.
No, I'm not either.
Yeah.
In fact, I accidentally hit it, and then I had to go back and go to the settings, and it was badly put together as far as manipulating these settings.
And you're already 2 hours in.
Yeah. No, well, what part? Oh, it was during Steiner's party where it happened. Suddenly they started speaking English because I had stopped it and accidentally went to the settings and put it on.
It's weird because there is some German and some French, but in the Amazon translation, right? But I'm saying like the English did not get subtitled.
Oh, okay.
The Italian did, but the French and the German or whatever did not get subtitled. So I'm like, I don't know. But okay, but this is not a subtitle 101 tutorial. So let's get to this party. Marcello's in advertising / publicity. He's basically repping these rich, famous, bored assholes, and he's at this party, and he has essentially a nervous breakdown. And he's like, at the end of it, he's ripping feathers out of pillows and pasting them on this girl. And which one was Nico? Was it the feather girl or was it someone else?
No, she was younger. She sort of looked, she had bangs, blonde, kind of a shag cut. She looked very modern.
Okay.
There was also a girl who I was trying to find who it was. There was also a girl who was advertised as a dancer who was blonde, sort of had a pajamas on and had like a braid. And she was very vivacious. In fact, when they first look into Ricardo's apartment, she has this really wild expression on her face before frickin' Marcello breaks the window.
Yeah, driving the car through the gate and smashing their way in. I'm like, what is even going on here?
And Ricardo coming in later and going, what are you people doing here? You got a half hour. I'm leaving for the airport.
Well, what I loved is that it feels like he's had to replace that window and that door like dozens of times because he's miffed.
Yes.
And he sits down and like starts drinking scotch or whatever with the partiers. Like, I'm serious, you guys, you got to leave in a half hour. And he lights a cigarette.
Well, also how about his wife, Nadia? She's divorcing him. So she's kind of throwing this party. So somehow she was with the revelers and she couldn't let him in the house? Or was that somebody else? I didn't get that. I thought Nadia was his wife, was Ricardo's wife.
I was kind of fuzzy on the relationships here.
Right.
Because I think what you're saying makes sense. Maybe Ricardo had the locks changed or something.
Yeah, right. She may have been in another apartment. Right. But how about her strip tease?
What's interesting is it really is a tease, because you're wondering how
Yeah,
much are they going to show, not
right,
necessarily out of a lascivious thing, but it just keeps going and going. Like, is this
right,
that kind of movie? And it's not really, except for this one scene. It might be when Ricardo enters. We're
right.
sort of like far away from it on the floor, and
Yeah,
we can
she's
see that she's
topless.
completely, yeah, she's naked, but you can't really, she's not defined. You can just tell
Right.
because the fur rug is off or whatever.
Oh,
Um,
and she's also wearing panty. I believe me, I freeze framed. No, I didn't.
you perv.
I
No,
am a perv.
but no, it's the whole, that whole scene. I
Yeah,
What I loved about it is it goes on way too long, and it becomes less and less enjoyable to watch, even given Fellini's
right.
artistry, which I think is a meta commentary on, Marcello's party is long since over, and he's just now starting to realize it, and we all
Right.
want to go home.
Well, what do you think the baptism of feathers means? He baptizes everybody with feathers as they walk out. Is there an angel reference there? Is it just like you said, the end of the road? So he might as well throw some ceremonial dust on everybody as they leave. I
I
mean, it was so cruel what he did to that woman. It really, you almost like want to turn it off
Well,
because she didn't deserve that. She was just a drunk girl, a drunk woman.
right.
Sorry, drunk girl.
No,
The term drunk girl, the
well, we also
completely
don't
out of it person who
we also don't
she's
know how old she was.
picking feathers on her. Was it a past paramour of his? Probably. It was sad. It really made me uncomfortable,
Yeah,
as you said.
well, me too. And I think the idea of the baptism is, much like a lot of the other religious imagery in this movie. By the end of it, he's kind of like so far past the idea of love or redemption. He's just swallowed up his own. He's become swallowed up by his own, you know, stubborn secularity, I guess. That
Yeah,
this baptism of the feathers is, the angel wings, I think, is an apt analogy. He's almost like,
yeah,
mocking God, like,
right,
I'm down
right,
here, there's no coming back, so screw
right,
you.
right. And it kind of leads into the next scene, which we talked about before, of the beach, and the sea monster has washed ashore,
That
a
beautiful,
leviathan, if you will.
is it a giant stingray? Was that what that was? I
I
mean,
think it was, yeah. They describe it as a leviathan, which means a mythical sea creature. But was it an actual fish, or was it a fake
if
like
it was
leviathan that they made up? It had the all-seeing eye.
a fake, it benefited from the black and white photography, I think, because it looked real enough to me.
Yeah, yeah. Most likely it was. Fellini went to the village and said, "Could you get me something that looks horrible?" We caught it the other day. It's in the butcher shop.
Yeah, but it's great because, our waitress shows
I'm
up.
Fellini.
Yeah.
Of course, Mr. Fellini.
If he's eating a fish, he'd be having a fish Fellini.
Oh,
Sorry.
God.
No more, I
Something
promise.
that McDonald's might want to consider.
Fellini of fish.
Fellini and fish.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give that an 8.5.
I would.
Sorry.
I would also have action figures from La Dolce Vita. Collect them all, kids.
What? Marcello with the slapping action? Is that what we're talking about here?
Or someone with the slapping action.
The car that you can easily drag someone out of when they refuse to leave?
Yeah, the car that you can stick paparazzo on in the back.
He's got, yeah, like it's got like a little peg on the top back seat. You can stick him on it and never come off, no matter how many
And
times you
believe
flip
me,
it.
the most collectible would be Sylvia.
Oh yes, yes. Wow. She comes with a pencil so she can sign her name on the Vatican. It's like the Waiting for Guffman, My Dinner with Andre toys. It's like that
Oh
would be the
yeah,
same
yeah.
line. But okay, getting to the very end of this, we kind of talked about it before.
Yes.
Marcello appears to make his choice. I want to ask you, what is the significance of the fact that the waitress is yelling to him, or like signing to him basically, and they can't hear each other? Is that
Well, I again, I was thinking it's the door of Valhalla. Where it's the door that is between the redemption and the same life, or the singular life that he's. I mean, I'm sure film classes since the 70s have broken down that scene as far as what they're doing to each other. Because, okay, obviously you can't hear what she's saying, and the wind is like tremendously loud in this scene. And then she starts doing a series of gestures. And I think she's saying, come over to this side, come back to me, or come to me. And here you will find the next phase of your life. And he says, no, I'm going to stay with where I'm at. Even though I'm at the end of it, uh, I'm going to keep going, and, live in my own squalor. There's so many interpretations. But I think significantly, you have to replay the scene and look at her gestures.
Yeah, I mean, and also look at him too, because
Right,
even earlier in the party, when we see him, not just the outfit change, where it's kind of a white suit with like a black ascot,
right,
but his face, his eyes are particularly sunken. He's got a little bit of
right.
makeup on his cheeks to make them look a little bit sunken in. So
And
he's
his hair is different. It's sort of peppery.
right. So the life, I don't know how long has what amount of time we've lost in the narration,
Right.
but it doesn't seem like a long time. It just seems like however many months or couple of
I would,
years, it's just that's drained him of his humanity.
yeah. I would say, yeah, there's a significant amount of time because he's completely changed careers, but he's also doing the same thing in a different way. And in that different way, it's like you said, sucked the life out of him.
And it's
Uh,
also a metaphor for, I think, getting away from, well, not even a metaphor, that's your trajectory of the film, because he's gotten into this tabloid, writing because it's, easy money and easy access to the lifestyle he wants. He
right,
keeps talking about the book that he's writing, or the book, everyone's like, so did you finish your book? When are you finishing it? He
right,
keeps putting it past him. So by the end, he's a publicist or he's in advertising, the complete opposite end of, spontaneous creativity
right,
that you can get. And that I think is for, getting him further away from the source of inspiration, that would have been God, I guess.
right. And the element of what he was creating with writing is teased to be some sort of work of literature,
Hmm.
uh, opposite to his tabloid writing, and of course being a publicist. Um, so there is that scale that he obviously is wrestling with throughout the film, and but he's a guy who likes his base elements, but I think we're seeing with that party it's catching up to him.
Yeah. And
He
he's,
he wants people to participate in an orgy, and they're like, "What are you talking about, old man?" It's just like
well, yeah. And
crazy.
he's kind of in limbo, for lack of a better term, because he's not young enough to corral an orgy with these people, but
Right,
he's also got a lot of years left. I don't know
right,
how old he's supposed to be in this movie
right,
from start to finish, but he's not, he might have another 40 years of having to deal with the consequences of, his actions, which
well,
yikes.
well. Also, too, Steiner is sort of a it's not like an advice giver, but a representative of the world that he has perhaps passed by, uh, but still maybe like envies, for lack
Mhm.
of a better term, but he can't do it. And for Steiner to off himself is sort of a representation of the part of him that died, having to do with that possible life.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ, we're like PBS now.
that's what we do here, man. But no, I think that's a good place to end it, because
Yeah,
as you mentioned, Steiner's death really shook him up. You could see that he
right,
was like really kind of freaked out by it. Still maintained the composure of, I'm going to go with you to break the news to the wife, because someone familiar has to be there to help in that situation. But yeah, he doesn't know how to process this. But I'm really glad that you chose this to revisit and for me to visit for the
well,
first time.
I think it's just a lucky happenstance because again, I've been on this DVD thing where they're sending me stuff, and one of them was La Dolce Vita. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, I haven't seen this in years. And then I was glad that you were willing to take on, and I know, it's always daunting when you see, oh, 3 hour film, I'll never get around to it. But the point is, you can't. In this one, it was nice because there was episodes,
Yeah.
and in fact, the good halfway points after the Steiner party, and then you can go into the rest of it and still feel like you picked up a book after coming to the end of a chapter. So if you're looking for recommendations on how to watch La Dolce Vita,
if you can't watch it start to finish, yeah, of course.
Right. And I'd be perfectly willing also, if you wanted maybe later in the year, not next month or whatever our next one is, to do 8.5 as well, because it would be a good 1-2. Again, it has Marcello Mastroianni in it, and it also deals with a particular time in life. It's 8.5 film, and it's Fellini through the character. So it's Fellini through this character too. That he just gave him a different profession.
Well, we should definitely put that on the list, because
good.
As I mentioned, watching this, I was not prepared for how big a production this was. I saw Spielberg all over this thing, with the sweeping opening and just the shots of the setup with the Virgin Mary sighting and everything. Right. I'm like, this Spielberg is watching this guy early on, and I'm not saying he ripped him off, but you could just see inspiration. Like, if you're a budding filmmaker, if you have it in you to make movies and you see La Dolce Vita, it's going to change you.
Well, did you have the introduction by Scorsese?
No.
That's on the Blu-ray. So
okay, I got to watch that.
It's good. It's very brief, briefer than I thought it would be, the way Scorsese is. But it was very, very touching. It was poignant, and I think because he had seen it in its opening in 1959, and he said in New York City it was a roadshow picture, meaning that you had to buy tickets in advance. You got your seat like you're going to a Broadway show. I mean, this was a huge deal coming from overseas, and the rest I'll let you see. But it was so inspirational to so many people, and I believe that every frame in here is a painting of some sort.
I thought that exact same thing while I was watching it, because it's quite remarkable, and that's not, people say that sometimes about movies. It's definitely true in here. But
with the black and white brush too, and the grays and the tones and it's extraordinary. I couldn't imagine this in color. It just wouldn't work.
That would be blasphemous.
It would, and it does further the argument about the colorization controversy, which is long gone, of course. But when you consider things like this, it can't be done. You can't do it. You just can't. Of course, out there, man, if you've never seen this movie, please give it a shot. And remember the seven chapters, the 7 deadly sins, the days of the week, the days of creation, all that stuff.
I hadn't thought about any of that, except, wow, okay. Am I going to have to go back and watch this movie, a 3-hour movie again?
7.
Oh, God. All right. Pat,
perhaps.
Pat, Uber Critic McDonald, thank you very much for recommending this again and for talking about it. I love this movie even more after having spent time breaking it down with you.
And it's a type of movie that if anybody out there has like a film discussion club, this is the one to do, because as you can see, it lends itself to many, many, many interpretations, and all of them are legitimate.
Yes. All right, man. Well, thank you very much. We'll find something to talk about next month, probably for Mother's Day or something, because I think that's a really fun idea.
That is a great idea.
Yeah. All right, sir. Thank you.
The ultimate mother movie.
How about Mother by Darren Aronofsky?
Oh my. Oh yes. My.
All right, sir. Take it easy. I'll talk to you later. Bye.